Once I dreamt my father back to life, sea green robes around him. He met me at my bus stop. He smiled, muttered something, and walked with me up the street to home. His eyes still sunk into black rings on his face from when he was sick. I once sleepwalked to that same bus stop when he was still alive, practicing for when he died.
The nursery and all of the trees cross over the dark, and some old parking lots hold my whimpering thoughts, and I'm on the next train. You and me, can't you see what this means? In the light of a torch, realize nothing is forced, nothing is forced.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Nursery podcast with Lee Boyle and
me
is here, and we're here to talk to you today about confidence. I have some. DJ, do you?
I don't know.
Well, I think it's very obvious that you're brimming with it, and you're trying to showboat on my show, and I don't appreciate it because I'm the center of this thing. But no,
apologies.
Yeah, just like step back. Anyways, no, confidence through the eyes of an Ohioan who lives in either me, Boardman, Ohio, or you, if I can say, the Ridge, Mineral Ridge, Ohio. I'm drunk. No, we're from some weird little places. Some listeners might stumble on this and be like, who are you? I don't care. But then they'll get hooked by our charming personalities. Mm-hmm. And we should explain ourselves a little bit. We're creative people in a place that sometimes isn't so creative. Where has your confidence come since you were a kid? Like, what, compare and contrast with me, just for the benefit of someone who might be struggling with confidence who's listening. Where has your confidence, what has it become since you were a kid versus now?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about, you first sort of asked where my confidence comes from. And I think that's maybe hard to quantify because confidence has actually been kind of a theme throughout all of my, I guess, creative endeavors. But I mean, I guess you could kind of argue that that's a part of the artistic process. But
but you more consciously wanted it to be a theme.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of ubiquitous when you think of art, though, because, like, the first question is, if you have something to say, is it worth being heard or expressed, Mm-hmm. And that directly has to do with confidence. And that's art,
Yeah.
You're expressing something, and you have to choose whether or not to, to share that expression. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as a child, I expressed myself. I never really repressed any emotions or anything, but I had some childhood trauma that led to me kind of questioning my own reality, and that sort of made confidence turn into this more abstract idea of, like, me knowing what it was but not knowing, like, firsthand, not feeling it firsthand. And so really until maybe 4 years ago when my daughter was born, that's really when confidence became, a tool in my tool belt. I feel like, and that was just out of necessity, Mm-hmm. My kid needed, parent that knew how to do things, knew how to take care of her, and being wishy-washy about that was not an option. So
That's new. So I've asked a few of this year's guests about confidence, and confidence out of necessity is not something anyone has touched on just yet. So, that being said, are you saying you wouldn't have had much of anything if it wasn't for having a child?
Well, I mean, I can say that I wouldn't have much of anything without Sylvie. I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter is like everything, in the more like macro sense. But what you're asking, I mean, I guess it's hard to know. I mean, I think that maybe something down the road in my life would have come upon me and I would have found a different kind of confidence, but this is kind of how it played out, and I was in such a position that I didn't think it was really possible for me to get out of the place that I was in, but she got me out. So no, I guess not.
Okay, interesting. So, there are certain avenues that you've continued on after having a kid. You still managed to be a musician in Ohio, a visual artist in Ohio, and someone who also does some like professional visual work. Those things having a through line, would those things, you're obviously not escaping from those things to parenthood. Those things are still here, but would those things have eaten you alive or had dead ends, or have they been enhanced by fatherhood?
Right. So I actually have some thoughts on this, because it's more of a present thing than I would have thought it would be, or that anybody would really guess it to be in a situation like this. So as a single parent, like, there's a lot of just inherent guilt that I feel like just is attached to that. Just in projecting the what ifs and what could have, as far as situation for your child. And so one way that manifested for me was that, like, when my daughter was really young, like fresh baby, I felt like any attention that I gave to anything else whatsoever that wasn't like firsthand with her, whether I was getting something for her, researching something about what she needed, about her health, about food, or going somewhere to get something for her, if it wasn't directly about her, then I felt guilt about doing it. And that's something that like took a really long time for me to shake, and honestly I still feel it sometimes. But that feeling led to me basically not making anything for about a year, because I was still trying to make music at the time and work on some art related things when she was very young, when I had time to, but it just was kind of overwrought with guilt, and so I decided I kind of just stopped, partially because of the guilt and partially residually because of the attrition of the guilt, like feeling like I felt too beat up to want to do anything. And so as the year went on, it was actually a pretty tough year. I just felt more and more isolated, more stripped of my own power, my own identity, and that's when the confidence started to really wane again. And inevitably I got to a point where I realized that the first time we talked on the podcast, I mentioned this, making art is like a compulsory thing for me and a lot of artists. Like, if you're not making something, you start to atrophy, you're a little bit miserable, you're unfulfilled. At least personally, I don't make art for the end means of the experience of the person getting it necessarily. I don't do it for for recognition or for people to pay attention to me. I do it because the act of doing it is what gets me through. I feel like if I'm not making, then I'm a lesser version of myself.
Okay.
I'm not saying that those other things aren't inherently like a part of making art or sharing art, but I mean like priority-wise. And so, so I just realized that I needed to, in order for me to be healthy and for me to be at my fullest, and even for me to set an example for my kid to, follow doing what she wants to do with her life and setting my example, that I needed to get back into creating again. And that's when I started working on my latest album, Alms.
Listeners, if you care about your host's tastes, and you can go into the buzz bin of my mind for the Youngstown area. Well, that's not too old of a term for you guys to get. But if you go into the Lee's Picks catalog, Bitter Alms is number one in Youngstown. So and DJ doesn't fancy himself as like this dude who's going touring around in your face about like my new album's out and stuff. He's not like me, but he does this music. He's still doing it for some of the same reasons I'm doing it, in that the music will help you if you listen to it. Hopefully, it's like there is a lot of musicians I know, the whole reason they're reaching out. This conversation we just had. Single parents listening, it's for you. It's to help you. So DJ stuff is meditation based oftentimes, and so it's there to make your day better. So he has, tell him about just a snapshot of your music self.
Okay. As a musical artist, I have been writing and performing under the name Bitter Alms since my first EP was I think in 2011, and it was called Shackleton, and it had a lot to do with me trying to extract some positivity out of my childhood in relation specifically to my dad, because I had a pretty rough childhood as far as that goes. And so it's kind of it's textural, it's tactile, and it's sometimes like cloyingly sweet. It's a lot of synthesizers and loops and things, but I always record somewhat freeform based on a concept and also chasing a tone of said concept. And then I've done a few singles and songs for compilations and one-offs, but then Alms I decided to do a more fully fleshed out album, and I spent a lot of time with an upright piano and just wrote it out over some time, and that one has a lot to do with parenthood.
Your daughter's on the album.
Yeah. There's a field recording of her talking about her favorite dinosaur as an undertrack on one of the album tracks. And so I I recorded a decent bit of that myself, and then I had it mixed by Sam at Historian, who did your album.
There are a couple through lines, if listeners care. So, just to plug, thirdclass.net has the Third Class release, Virginia's playlist, also mixed and recorded at Historian Recording Company. Shout out to them. And bitteralms.bandcamp.com has all of the releases we're speaking of. For our guest today, bitteralms.bandcamp.com. Just so you guys can go and put a sound to what we're talking about if you haven't heard it yet. So, other through lines, DJ and I both write about family. It's weird. This music doesn't sound anything alike otherwise, but it like there's through line like feelings there.
Yeah.
And we write about family mixed at the same thing, stuff like that. And mastered at the same place.
That's
Cauliflower Audio, Cleveland, Ohio.
That's also true.
Yeah,
At the same master.
Yeah. So there are these through lines, but like totally different genres. If anyone cares about music that has that instills nostalgia and poetry, things like that, there's kind of those things cross over. And then while we're in the moment of telling the listener what they can attach to our conversation, can you talk about though right now unavailable, can you talk about your visual art through your recent book and talk about the title and what that book was?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so one thing I will say though, just to kind of maybe tie the segue that is that once Alms was completed, I felt like it was the period at the end of the sentence creatively, and so I guess I'm taking an indefinite hiatus with the music project, and that's not to say that I won't release any more music or won't update anything anymore, but I just I feel like creatively, because I'm a man of many mediums, sometimes I spread myself a little too thin, and I feel like I've finished that statement, and I'm working on some new projects in different mediums, and I need to give my focus to that. So once that album was over, I kind of it felt fulfilling, but I got back to a point of the question of what's next, and that's kind of like, that's a question that I can maybe ask you. Like, when you finish working on something creatively, if you finish like an album, or you finish writing something, maybe you've written a few pieces that you consider a collection of something, and then you finish it, like what happens next? Like, do you kind of flounder in your thoughts for a while about what you want to do next? Is it something that is a negative experience for you? Like, do you feel lost in between things? Do you are you dependent on those projects? Like, do you project yourself into them enough that like you feel a little bit lost in who you are at all, even between projects? Like,
that's cool, because okay, so I initially asked you if art in general would maybe dead end or eat you alive if it wasn't for your daughter, but your answer was that not doing it eats you alive, and then you had to start doing it to get confidence for parenthood. For partially confidence for parenthood. So like, obviously not doing art is not the answer. We've established that. Right. For most people, we can say safely, probably. And then, so to bounce into another medium probably is smart, so that you're not stopping cold. Yeah, it is just distracting yourself from maybe some dark things in life. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, that you don't want to like tell people, don't think too much about death, just make this art instead and distract you. Like, it's not, but it partially is that. It is a distraction. It's an escape for people, the people enjoying the art, and so don't stop. But yeah, per that project, I think there is some floundering. I think there is like, the project's over, you jump to some visual, or the visual's over, you jump to some audio. What do? Yeah, you don't know you're doing it, but you're starting to write the next thing.
But is it fair to call it distracting when it's something that's so like something that's so, what's the word I'm looking for, like nourishing?
I don't know. Maybe only the process is distracting and the product isn't. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think you can make anything a distraction. You know, like
it's on the viewer or the listener.
Right. There's ways to like overly throw yourself into something to avoid other things. It doesn't necessarily have to be art, though. Right. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about the detriment you described when you talked about stopping. Like, what lies in that? Like, what your confidence is coming directly from your art, and then it spills into everything else.
Yeah.
So
But because it never goes away.
Yeah. Is it a distraction? Yeah.
No. That's actually what I mean is. So I know that no matter what I do, if I'm between projects and I'm not working on something, it does start to build up. It gets to me negatively. Now, does that mean that? Man, I don't know how to say this. Like, does that mean that it's like you want to think that making art is something that you're like building on something for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a means to grow, something to keep you healthy, even, and I think if you consider it from that point, like if not doing art is unhealthy, and doing art is healthy. But if you stop doing it, you're not in a better place than you were. Do you get what I'm getting at?
Totally. I think the problem. I think
hypothetically
that what you're dealing with here is that it's not actually like. Of course, I feel more than respect for the declaration of a hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
It's real, but I think what you're referring to is that stuff's never over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that like, it's just not, it's always going to be there, partially because most people we know who are a little bit creative tend to immediately, even in the moment that we're talking right now, make everything nostalgic. Everything has this romantic little frame on it wherever we go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're bending the truth by any means, but I think we see beauty.
Yeah.
Wherever. And so, music is right inside your interactions with your daughter and stuff.
Yeah, well,
it's right there all the time. There's no hiatus.
I guess I was trying more to... I was saying, like, healthy versus unhealthy in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a hypothetical, just because, like, I personally don't believe that art is all good, or that art is all healthy, or that being an artist is something that is a wonderful experience. Like I think, back to the point of, compulsion to make art, like needing to make art to stay sane or to feel okay. I mean, it's possible that maybe, like, at least for me during my childhood, even drawing or using my imagination to play with something, or painting or doing whatever I was doing, or even making collections. I made collections of lots of different things as a kid, and even doing all of that was something that maybe even cognitively, like, trained my brain to retreat to that of somebody that needs to make something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is that harmful?
Well, I'm not saying it's harmful. It's like my question is it a healthy practice, or is it a coping mechanism?
Yeah.
And I think maybe the answer, at least for me, lies in yes and no, and yes and no. So, I mean, I don't mean to, like, I'm not trying to, like, dissect, like, the nuances of all of this. I just feel like
that's interesting. Yeah. Is it more that one or more the other?
Yeah.
It is both, but is it closer to one? Is it closer to survival again? But is it closer to keeping away, like just keeping something at bay, or is it closer to, like, oh, that's the beauty? And so
right.
Yeah, that's a good question. I find that it's totally, even though the person that says it's best not to think about it makes you angry, they make you angry. Sometimes they're right in the moment. They're in the moment. Like, to think it through a few times is great, but then to just sit there and live there is bad.
I get what
I
you're
guess
saying.
I'm talking about death or something big.
Yeah.
So if we apply that to this, it's both. And everybody says, even if they're not artists, that the happy times that they've experienced in their lives, the really good stuff, is not necessarily more than the sad.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way I can speak to what your dissection is that yeah, it might very well be more a coping mechanism
mm-hmm.
than a beautiful thing, mm-hmm. but it's impossible for it not to be for anybody, because most people's happy moments, they let it outweigh the sad ones because they just hold on tight, but they're not actually more frequent in any way. And that's coming from someone who's very unhappy. Like I love life. I've had, like anybody else, way down, way up, but those way ups are just things that I hold on tighter to and project more. So if anyone who's listening does art as an escape, but they can hold on to that and like still live their life right, pay their bills, and do their things they need to do, that's a feat, because you can cope so much that you're gone. You can cope so much that you're just like, ew, this dude's not even like doing stuff anymore. Like you can get lost. You can be this person who has these canvases and these sheets up and these things, and they're painting on the wall, writing notes on their wall, and then you're like, dude, you ruined art.
Well, but at the same time, I mean, I arguably can go the other way too. I mean, I feel like it's possible to be an artist that's tapped into making art that is true, pure expression and great art, but it is something that's very unhealthy for you as the artist. Or even, you could eat. I think the universe has shown us that you can be an amazing artist and a piece of shit at the same time. You can like seriously get into the realm of lying to yourself through the art and stuff like that, or get into taking the art so seriously that it makes you into this terrible person. Like it's like, I even mean getting into celebrity though, like like the Bill Cosbys and Woody Allen and Roman Polanski
or now apparently that's what they that's what something of that mindset was involved.
I'm just trying to detach the idea of like goodness versus art. You're right in what I'm just trying to say.
You're right. It shouldn't be there are examples of huge people that like should have been happy with what they had and took it somewhere else, to a weird place. Now, so this podcast is themed around Ohio, of course, and there's a certain confidence that lies in being in an area where you can take you can kind of build your own little stage of like exactly what you want to do, because there's no scene to do it in just yet. So you don't have to adhere to anybody else's rules in some ways around here. Not that you'd have to in somewhere else be part of some little flock, some herd, but here you start with nothing. You just start with nothing. What are some parallels between parenthood and art, where you started with scratch, let's say, in both instances, and now they've progressed into something else?
Sure. Well, that's a few things. First and foremost, no matter what anybody tries to tell me about, like, pulling myself up by the bootstraps or whatever other, like, contrived platitudes, like, I think that there is, at least in my experience, a struggle with control. A control in knowing where my creative aspirations are going to take me, in knowing how I'm going to find the resources, in knowing if I have the ability to do what I feel like I am compelled to do. And I mean, with parenthood, control is like good luck if you're a control freak. Good luck being a parent, because there's so many things that can happen that are just beyond you and your control. So I think that's definitely a thing. I think that it is fulfilling if you have a good balance of self. I think that, man, well, I guess so. You mentioned like starting from nothing to where you are now. Like getting to that point is, in both instances, it's scary, and you know, you learn your weaknesses very quickly, and you learn new strengths that you didn't know you had. And it's also, I feel like I'm a more empathic and sensitive person for both of those things. With my daughter, man, my heart wrenches every time she like bumps her knee even, and every time I see something on the news involving like the misfortune of, you know, a baby or a child or something, especially due to like violence or, you know, some psychopath, it takes me a while to recover from hearing that. And in art, I mean, it's not the same thing at all, but it's linear in that, like, I've seen works of art that have just kind of floored me and made me question a lot of things that I thought that I understood.
Yeah. So in hoping that people with confidence problems or questions about confidence are listening and may have been enlightened, and in hoping that maybe more specifically single parents might get something out of this, because there's plenty. We'll just close up, but my last little question for you is, so the balance of self you briefly mentioned. I assume you're talking about what others think of you versus what you think of you a little in that, or what's the balance there?
The balance of self, I was referring to where you place your energies.
Oh, okay.
Like what percentage of yourself goes to what aspects of your life.
Okay. I was wrong. Well, humor me then and tell me how much you let others define you.
Less and less.
Okay.
That was something that was a really, really big problem for me. Coming up to more years in my life than I'd like to admit, to be honest. And that really didn't start to shift until Sylvie came along also. I had a really hard time kind of separating the idea of what other people thought of me versus what I thought of myself. So I would need to find ways to feed into making sure that people felt the way about me that I wanted them to. and I don't mean that in a good way.
No, I wouldn't think so.
I mean, like, I think we're all capable of wanting to project ourselves in a positive way, and we want people to like us. Just, it's kind of like a natural part of like being a part of the herd, you know?
Yeah.
But when you have some unhealthy coping strategies that were built around your childhood, you kind of like, there's blurred lines between, you know, reality that's true and a reality that's in your mind. And so if I lie to myself, that I'm lying to other people, you know, like that, and not even being aware of it, you know, like I think that it's really sad, but I've never actually admitted this really like publicly. I mean, some of my friends are aware of it, but for about 8 years of my life, I was a compulsive liar. And that was a really shitty time because of,
all of the damage that can do to relationships in your life and to people you care about. And it's easy to justify to yourself saying like, well, I have good intentions, but it doesn't really work out that way. Like it doesn't matter if you have good intentions, because it's such a destructive thing. And you would think that saying something to try to make yourself seem more interesting or cooler, or to get yourself out of trouble for something, that a little statement here or there would be relatively benign, but it kind of undermines everything. And then you wind up in a place where as soon as you confront the fact that you're not honest with yourself, that you don't know who you are anymore. And that's fucking terrifying. And so and it's something that I personally, there's some people in my life that have confided in me about similar problems, and I've been trying really hard to be an advocate for just trying to let someone feel like they have a safe place to be honest about who they are with me, because I know how terrifying that can be. And there's really nothing that you could say that would scare me if you were a person in that position. So it's something that I think maybe some good has come out of it. But what was the initial question?
No. That's, you answered it through so I asked you how much you let others define you, and you said less and less, and I see why you say that now, because I was about to take a stance of well, what if they define you as something you like? But you're coming from a different thing here, and that was very interesting. And I'm glad you came out the other end and are okay now, and that's great. Yeah. And I'm glad that the way you could pay forward from that is to listen to others who might have something.
I will say though that it's not. There's no perfect romantic conclusion to that.
No, sure.
I still struggle sometimes. Just kind of if I'm backed into a corner, sometimes I'll just kind of, the line of honesty and dishonesty, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to wanting to be polite or things like that. Yeah. But if you're somebody that needs it to be black and white, as someone that's dealt with something like this, it's really hard to make those decisions beyond that point. So you have to choose to either be really abrasive and always say exactly what you mean literally and hurt a lot of people's feelings, or you need to work in that gray area and run the risk of basically relapsing.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
Because I see, and maybe this is unfair, and maybe people will listen to this and think that I'm a piece of shit, but I see, cognitive disorders like that as something that's behaviorally linear to an addiction, because of the way it programs your brain. And so it's something that you can't just say well, I'm gonna never do that again. It's something that it lives with you because you have an impulse in your brain. And it's a safety net that you want to go towards.
Say somebody who kicked a pill addiction for years ends up having to take a pain medication.
Right.
What if you come upon someone who very obviously wants you to lie to them? Because they want out of the conversation. Just for some dumb reason.
Right.
Maybe there's an equivalency there. And so I get it. It's not. I'm not gonna sit here and try to tie a bow on it as the host and be and we're glad you're out of the woods now. But I mean to say the progress of you saying it now here on mic is great. And best of luck, of course, with anything that has to do with that. And as far as letting others define people, whoever they are, the best instances I've ever had with somebody defining me for me have always been things that they mean to be beautiful. Sometimes I don't look at it that way. I think they're making me ugly, and they're not. They're noticing something I never noticed before, and it's gorgeous. And I let others define me sometimes through... you know what I mean? They'll be oh, you always do this. And I'll be really? And then I'll find it, and I'll be cool. I won't always. Sometimes I'll be like, you're taking that wrong. I'll stand up for what I think I am. But there are instances. I'm not trying to get you to now go take what everybody thinks of you and turn it into a positive. I'm not saying that. I just mean my world's opened up when people tell me I'm a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, no, I'm not. Like, it feels probably on lighter notes than what we've dealt with mostly in this podcast. Like, I just mean to say they're finding the beauty that you don't see in yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're trying to just like be jovial about it, and people always get so hurt.
Yeah.
And it's weird because like they're seeing this gorgeous side of you that you'll never see in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to let that in.
It's hard. It's so hard. And it's weird to let it in. When you do, it's rare, but it's once in a while it really hits home, and it's nice.
Yeah.
It's really hard though. You're right. It's hard to let it in, even if it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, like example, like someone's like, "You always say this and it's stupid." And you're like, "No, I don't." Like, but then sometimes people are like, "But it's so endearing that you always say that." You know, they kind of are trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're trying to rib you over something that's cool about you.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And people are always like lock up and they're like, no, I don't. Why?
Yeah,
and they get all neurotic about the
defensive.
thing. Yeah, it's weird. It's like a lot of times it's all good.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know people that don't have imperfect? You know, like when you think about what you think of them.
Well, you're challenging their self-perception.
Yeah,
That's a tough thing to reckon with.
Yeah, it's hard. But then all you gotta do is take a beat and think about what you think of them, and you're like, oh, it's all good.
Do you want to? We can mention we didn't finish mentioning the book real quick.
Please.
I'll keep this concise, but I just to finish what you requested that I mention it.
Yeah.
I recently published a book called Portraits of an Adamant City about the city of Youngstown and Youngstown, Ohio, and it includes, I think, 32 images of the city that I've collected and taken over the last 3 years. And the first run was 50 copies, and as Lee said, they are out of print currently, but I will eventually do a second run. The book was meant to be just a perspective of Youngstown as a whole from myself, and that is meant to be kind of a that of an observer rather than that of somebody trying to make you think or see something specifically. I think there is an inherent tone to the way that I shoot the city, and I hope that my feelings about it do translate, but I didn't want to set up any of the images to be, specifically evocative. I didn't want to riddle the book with what they call ruin porn of, abandoned buildings and rust everywhere, and I didn't want it to be an overt romanticization of the city either. I didn't want it to be anything that it wasn't. I just wanted to show it and hope that people saw how I saw it.
That's cool, man. That's a nice closing thought, because hopefully we're playing a little bit into the interests of listeners of this podcast, in that an interesting Ohio awaits to be explored. A couple podcasts back, I had a guest who does a fun little blog, 1465erbust.wordpress.com. The guests I have, I feel very lucky to have, that care to explore Ohio and I don't know, just put down root where they're at and live life and find the beauty in where they are, let alone travel and then miss the place and come home and that kind of stuff. So it's cool. Any listeners who might have come across that book, hopefully you're enjoying it, and I'll be the first to let anyone know if like a couple copies surface someday. eBay, $1 million each.
There will be a second run soon, but they won't be hand numbered.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
keep an eye out. Is there any place you'd like to tell them to go to check out your visual art, or would you rather just leave that open-ended, just for them to Google your name or something?
Yeah, find it if you can.
Yeah, find it. David Pokrivnak. The band, again, the musical project associated with them, listeners, again, is Bitter Alms.
Yeah.
Find them on Bandcamp. Though they're on hiatus, there's a nice little catalog to choose from. One single that I always recommend is Utilities. C10?
Yep.
I don't,
That's the length
it's getting
of the cassette.
detailed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting detailed, but yeah, Utilities. And of course, the newest one that we harped on the most, Alms. Check that out. 8 songs? 5 songs. It feels like, it's weird. It doesn't feel long because it's like too hard to listen to, but it feels like an album.
It's 4 songs and a cover song.
Yeah.
By Brian Eno.
That's all it is, but it feels right.
Good.
It is an album.
On the record, my closing statement is just going to be, I want this to be on record. You got to go interview Anthony LaMarca next.
Oh, sure, man. There's probably all kinds of little gems in his world of
Yeah.
Ohio.
For sure.
All right, man. Well, can you say, look, Mom, we're on a podcast?
Look, Mom, we're on a podcast.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Thank you.
Nursery is sponsored by the Orange Avocado 1393, Boardman, Ohio. Also sponsored by Timeless Shots Photography, timelessshots.com, and the Jimmy Fro Indie Music Show. Find them on iTunes and review them. Make sure you check out the music at thirdclass.net, comedy at bullskit.com, and thanks for listening.